The morning Tund Adeyemi was thrown out of his father's house. He was 11 years old and carrying everything he owned in a plastic bag. The bag was not large. It held 2 school uniforms, 1 pair of trousers that had become too short at the ankles, a small notebook he used for mathematics, and a photograph of his mother. The photograph was creased at one corner from being held too many times. He had been holding it since the night before, when he understood for the first time that he was truly going to leave. His stepmother, Mama Beezy, stood at the compound gate with her arms folded. She had the expression of a woman completing a task she had planned for a long time. Beside her, her 2 children, Beezy and Biodun, watched from the doorway. Beezy was eating a piece of bread. "Go," Mama Beezy said. "Your father has agreed. There is nothing for you here." Tund looked at the gate. He looked at the house behind it. The house where his mother had cooked pepper soup on cold harmattan mornings, where his father had taught him to read using a torn Bible, where he had grown from a baby into the boy now standing at the edge of being pushed out. He looked at all of it with the careful eyes of someone making sure they would not forget. Then he walked through the gate. He did not cry. He was 11 years old, and he had already learned that crying in front of people who had decided not to care about you was the one thing you must never do. He walked. The story of how Tund Adeyemi came to be standing at that gate on that morning began 6 years earlier, when his mother died. Her name had been Folake. She was a seamstress who worked from a small room at the front of their house in the Agodi area of Ibadan, her sewing machine humming from morning to evening while Tund played at her feet. She had a laugh that people in the neighborhood could identify from 3 houses away. She told Tund every night before he slept that he was the best thing she had ever made. Better than any dress. Better than any fabric. She died of a sudden illness when Tund was 5. The doctor said it came on quickly. His father, Alhaji Adeyemi, a quiet man who drove a commercial bus on the Lagos road, grieved in the way men of his generation grieved. Silently, in the early mornings before anyone woke, and never in front of his son. 2 years later he remarried. Her name was Ramota, but everyone called her Mama Beezy after her firstborn. She arrived with Beezy and the younger Biodun, and the particular energy of a woman who had made up her mind about what her new life would look like before she moved a single item into the house. Tund was 7 when Mama Beezy arrived. He tried. He greeted her every morning in Yoruba with both hands properly folded. He swept the compound before she asked. He shared his school books with Beezy without complaint. He tried to be small enough that she would have no reason to notice him. But Mama Beezy always had reason. The soup Tund stirred was never the right consistency. The compound he swept always had one corner she could find fault with. When Alhaji Adeyemi was home, she spoke of Tund with careful words that sounded like concern, but carried something else beneath them. "He is a difficult child," she would say. "He answers back. He wastes food. He is not doing well in school." None of these things were true. But Alhaji Adeyemi drove his bus from morning to night 6 days a week, and came home tired in a way that made it difficult to see clearly. He nodded at what his wife told him, and said he would speak to the boy. But as the years passed, he spoke to Tund less and less. By the time Tund was 9, the geometry of his life in the house had arranged itself into something he could no longer pretend was temporary. He ate after Beezy and Biodun. He did the heaviest housework while they watched television. When there was one piece of meat in a pot, it went to Beezy. When there was money for one school excursion, Biodun went. When the electricity bill was due and money was short, it was Tund's school fees that Mama Beezy suggested delaying. She never raised her voice at him. That was the particular thing about Mama Beezy. She was not the kind of stepmother who shouted. She was the kind who arranged. She arranged the house around her children's comfort, and around Tund's discomfort with a quiet efficiency that could not be easily pointed to or named. There was always a reason. The reason was always reasonable. And the reasons, accumulated over years, added up to a life in which Tund was present in the house but absent from the family. He learned to eat whatever was left without expression. He learned to sleep on the thin mat in the kitchen after Mama Beezy moved his foam mattress to Beezy's room for reasons she explained to Alhaji Adeyemi as a practical matter of space. He learned to ask for nothing because asking produced either silence or irritation. He learned to carry water from the borehole before sunrise so that by the time the household woke, His contribution was already invisible. And he kept his notebook close, and his pencil sharpened, because school was the one place where nobody could rearrange what he was worth. His teacher, Mr. Oladipo, noticed. Mr. Oladipo was a lean man in his 50s who had been teaching primary school in Ibadan for 27 years, and had developed the specific skill of identifying a child who was holding on to learning the way a drowning person holds on to a rope. He had seen children like Tun before, children who arrived at school with something haunted in their eyes and something fierce in their attention. Children who sat at the front of the class not because they were eager to perform, but because the classroom was the safest room they were in all day. He kept Tund after class one Friday afternoon. He set down his chalk and looked at the boy sitting alone at his desk. Tun, Mr. Oladipo said, I have been teaching mathematics for over 20 years. I want you to know that you are the best mathematics student I have seen in 15 of those years. Tun said nothing. He looked at the desktop. He was not used to receiving good news without a cost attached. There is a state mathematics competition in December, Mr. Oladipo said. I want to enter your name. The winner receives a full scholarship to any federal government secondary school of their choice. The school will cover your transport and the entry fee. You do not need to bring anything from home. Tun looked up at that. He said, The school will pay? I do not need to ask my stepmother. Mr. Oladipo held his gaze. You do not need to ask anyone for anything, he said. It was the first time an adult had said those words to him in the order they needed to be said. He sat with them for a long time after he left the classroom that afternoon, turning them over in his mind the way you turn over something precious to check if it is real. He did not tell Mama Beezy about the competition. He should have known that the school would send a letter home. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Mama Beezy read it at the kitchen table, while Tun stood in the doorway having just returned from fetching water. Her expression as she read was not anger. It was something quieter and more dangerous than anger. It was the expression of a woman who had found the moment she had been building toward for 2 years. That evening, Tun lay on his mat in the kitchen and listened through the thin wall. He heard Mama Beezy's voice, low and steady, going behind our backs. Thinks he is special. Making the family look like we are not caring for him properly. What will people say when they see his name in a competition and wonder why his own family did not support him? This is what I have been telling you about this boy, Al-Haji. He is not right. He will embarrass this family. He heard his father's voice. Quieter. Less certain. Saying the things a tired man says when he does not want to examine what he is agreeing to. In the morning, Al-Haji Adeyemi called Tund into the parlor. He sat in his bus driver's chair, the one that still bore the shape of the long hours on the Lagos road. He did not look comfortable. He looked like a man who had made a decision he was not entirely sure of and had decided the only way forward was to not look at it directly. Your stepmother feels it is best that you go and stay with your uncle for a while, he said. Just until things settle. Tund looked at his father. He looked at him for a long time. Long enough for Al-Haji Adeyemi to look away. Things will not settle, Tund said quietly. But he said it in his own head. Not out loud. Out loud he said nothing. He went to his mat. He packed the 2 uniforms, the trousers, the notebook, the photograph. The next morning, Mama Beezy stood at the gate with her arms folded. And Tund walked through. His uncle in Sengo was a man named Baba Kasali. He was his father's younger brother, a lean, quiet man in his early 40s who drove an Okada for a living and had never married. He lived alone in a 2-room apartment in a compound shared with 3 other families. He was not a cruel man. He was a man who lived close to the edge of what he could manage, and had not planned for a child. He gave Tund a mat in the corner of the sitting room, and 1 meal a day, usually in the evening. Rice or EBA with whatever stew was affordable that week. On the days when business was slow and a meal was thin, he apologized in the way of a man who is ashamed of what he cannot provide. Tund told him each time not to worry. He meant it. He had eaten thinner meals in a house where he was supposed to belong. The compound was different from what Tund had known in Agodi. Louder. More crowded. Children from the other apartments ran through the yard all day. Women called to each other across the compound walls. The smell of cooking came from 3 directions at once in the evenings. It was chaotic and honest in a way that the ordered quiet of his father's house, with its arrangements and its reasons, had never been. He enrolled himself in the nearest primary school using the transfer letter his father had placed in the plastic bag alongside the uniforms. The one practical thing Alhaji Adeyemi had done for him on the morning of the departure. The school was rougher than his Ibadan school. More crowded. The textbooks were shared 3 students to 1. But the mathematics was the same mathematics. Numbers did not change based on the quality of the room you were in. He went every day. He sat at the back now. Not because the front was taken, but because he had learned that being at the back gave you room to think without being watched. He had been at Baba Kasali's for 3 months when he understood something difficult. The scholarship competition Mr. Oladipo had told him about was in December. December had come. He was in Sango. The competition was in Ibadan. There was nobody to take him there. No money for transport. No way to tell Mr. Oladipo where he was. He opened his notebook on the evening of the date the competition was supposed to be held. He worked through problems until the compound went quiet and the lantern Baba Kasali lent him burned low. Then he closed the notebook and lay on his mat and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep for a long time. But he did not stop. He kept the notebook. He kept the pencil. He kept going to school. He kept doing what he could with what he had. Because when you are 11 years old and the world has been rearranged around your absence, the only true power you have left is to refuse to stop. The thing that changed everything happened on a Saturday in February, which was the day Baba Kasali went to visit his friend in Abeokuta and left Tun with money for bread and instructions to stay in the compound. Tun stayed. He sat in the small concrete yard behind the apartment block in the shade of the back wall, working through a set of algebra problems he had copied from a classmate's textbook. The sun moved across the yard. A cat from a next compound appeared and disappeared. The smell of someone's egusi soup drifted over the wall. In the afternoon, he gathered the compound's rubbish to take to the waste area at the back, past the broken zinc sheets and old blocks stacked against the rear wall. He had been doing this for Baba Kasali without being asked, because it was something useful he could do, and doing useful things was the way he kept himself from feeling useless. He was setting down the rubbish bag when he saw it. A leather bag. Dark brown. Partially hidden beneath a loose zinc sheet that leaned against the back wall, the edge of it just visible between 2 broken blocks. It was zipped shut. It was not old or dirty. The leather had barely been touched. Tun put down the rubbish bag. He stood very still. He looked at the bag. He looked at the compound behind him. The yard was empty. The compound was quiet. Baba Kasali was in Abeokuta. There was nobody. He crouched down and pulled the zinc sheet back. He lifted the bag out. It was heavier than he expected. He unzipped it. His hands went still. Inside were bundles of Naira notes. Organized bundles, wrapped with rubber bands and stacked in even rows. His eyes moved across them and his mind, which was a mathematics mind, began to count automatically. The number of bundles, the denomination visible on the outer note of each, the approximate total of what he was looking at. He sat back on his heels in the dust. He sat there for a very long time. The compound was silent around him. No one was coming. No one was watching. He was 11 years old and he had been put out of his home with a plastic bag, and he had missed a scholarship competition, and he was sleeping on a mat in his uncle's sitting room and eating 1 meal a day. He was looking at more money than his father earned in a year. More money than Baba Kasali would see in 5 years of Okada riding. He thought about Mama Beezy's arms folded at the gate. He thought about the piece of bread in Beezy's hand. He thought about his father looking away. He thought about the competition he had not gone to. He reached into the pocket of his trousers, the ones too short at the ankles, and took out the photograph of his mother. The crease at the corner was still there, from being held too many times. He held it now. He looked at her face. He sat with all of it in the dust of the compound, with the bag in one hand and the photograph in the other, and nobody watching. And then he stood up. He carried the bag inside. He placed it carefully under his mat. He sat on the edge of the mat and looked at the floor. He stayed there until he heard Baba Kasali's Okada in the street. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if this story is speaking to something in you, please subscribe to Visa's Tales. You will not want to miss what this boy does next. When Baba Kasali came in, Tun said, "Uncle, I need to show you something." He pulled the bag from under the mat. Baba Kasali's eyes went wide. He sat down heavily on his chair. He looked at the bag. He looked at Tund. He looked at the bag again. Where? He said. Behind the compound, Tund said. Under the zinc near the back wall. Baba Kasali called his neighbor, Mama Deli, who came immediately and stood in the doorway looking at the bag with her hand over her mouth. Mama Deli told her husband. Her husband made a phone call. By the next morning, the story had moved through the compound and into the surrounding street the way stories move in close-built neighborhoods, completely and without any possibility of containment. The owner of the money came that afternoon. He arrived in a car, not an enormous car, but a good one, clean and quiet, and he stepped out with the particular movement of a man who was trying not to show how frightened he had been. He was in his 60s, stout, with gray at his temples, and the bearing of someone who had commanded rooms for decades. His name, Baba Kasali's neighbor whispered, was Chief Afalabi. He was known in that part of Sango as a man of substance. He had hidden the money 2 days earlier in the compound, which he owned, when he had reason to believe someone in his own household was watching where he kept things. He had intended to return for it quietly within hours. But something had come up, and hours became a day, and a day became 2. And when he returned, the zinc was moved and the bag was gone. He had spent 2 days in the specific private terror of a man who cannot tell anyone what he has lost. He stood in Baba Kasali's small parlor and looked at the boy who had found it. Tund sat in the plastic chair. The bag was on his lap. He looked back at the man without performance. Chief Afalabi counted the money. He counted it twice, running his thumb across each bundle with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust quickly. When he finished, he set the bag on the table and looked at the boy. "It is all there," Tund said. Chief Afalabi said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "How old are you?" 11, Tund said. The man looked at him steadily. Then he said, "Why did you not take it? You could have gone anywhere. Nobody would have known." Tund considered this. He said, "I would have known." Chief Afalabi was silent. He looked at the mat visible through the doorway to the sitting room. He looked at the 2 school uniforms hanging on the nail by the window. He looked at the notebook on the floor beside the mat. He looked at all the evidence of the boy's life in this room, and something in his expression shifted from relief into something more deliberate. "What do you want from me?" he said. Tund said, "I do not want anything. It is not my money. I found it and I returned it." Chief Afalabi said, "That is not how this works. When a man is given something, he gives something back. It is how the world stays in balance." He looked at Tund directly. "Tell me about yourself." And Tund told him, not requesting sympathy, not arranging the facts for effect, just telling what had happened in the order it had happened, the way he would lay out the steps of a mathematics proof, each line following from the one before it, clear and without decoration. His mother. His father's silence. Mama Beezy's arrangements. The gate. The plastic bag. The mat in the corner. The competition he had not attended. The notebook he kept anyway. Chief Afalabi listened to every word without moving. When Tund finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Chief Afalabi said, "The state competition. You said the winner receives a scholarship." "Yes," Tund said. "But I missed it. It was in December." Chief Afalabi said, "There are other competitions?" Mr. Oladipo mentioned a national one, Tund said. "In April. But I am not at that school anymore, and I do not know if I can still enter." Chief Afalabi said, "What if I found out?" Tund looked at him carefully. He had learned to be careful with offers from adults. He said, "Why would you do that?" Chief Afalabi said, "Because I have spent 63 years watching this world waste people. I find I am no longer patient with it." He paused. "I have a secondary school in Abadan. I built it 12 years ago. I will give you a full scholarship. 6 years, everything paid including boarding. On one condition." Tund waited. "The condition is this," Chief Afalabi said. "You enter the national competition in April. You prepare as if your life depends on it. And you compete with everything you have." He held Tund's gaze. "The scholarship does not depend on you winning. It depends on you not holding back. Tun sat with this. He looked at the notebook on the floor. He looked at the man across from him. He said, I will need my transfer letter sorted and transport back to Abaddon to register at the school before the competition entry closes. Chief Afolabi laughed. It was a real laugh. Sudden and surprised, the kind that a man produces when something has caught him genuinely off guard. He looked at Baba Kasali, who was sitting in the corner trying to make himself very small. This boy, Chief Afolabi said, is negotiating with me. Baba Kasali said nothing. He smiled a small careful smile. Chief Afolabi reached into his jacket and produced an amount of money that covered transport and considerably more. He set it on the table between them. Tund looked at the money. He looked at the man. Then he stood up and held out his hand. Chief Afolabi stood. He shook it. A proper handshake. The kind between two people of equal seriousness. I will make arrangements, Chief Afolabi said. You will hear from me within the week. He heard within 3 days. The school transfer was arranged. The competition entry was confirmed. Chief Afolabi had spoken to the right people, as men of his kind could when they chose to. Tun was enrolled in the new school's boarding house in Abaddon 2 weeks later with his 2 uniforms, his trousers that were now shorter than ever, his notebook, and the photograph of his mother. He prepared for the competition the way he had always prepared for things he cared about. Quietly, thoroughly, without announcing it. He rose at 5 each morning and worked through problems before the dormitory woke. At lunch when others played, he sat with the textbook Chief Afolabi had arranged to be sent to the school. In the evenings he worked until the lights-out bell rang, and then lay in the dark and ran problems through his head until sleep took him. He did not think about Mama Beezy during this time. Not because he had forgiven or forgotten, but because she had become irrelevant to what he was doing. She had tried to close a door. He was walking through a different one. The National Mathematics Competition was held in Lagos in the last week of April. Tunde Adeyemi, 12 years old by then, sat at a desk in a large bright examination hall with students from 23 states. Some of them had been preparing with private tutors for months. Some of them came from schools with mathematics laboratories and computers. Some of them wore uniforms that had never been washed in a bucket. Tund looked at the paper when it was placed in front of him. He read the first problem. He picked up his pencil. He had seen harder problems in his notebook. He worked through the paper the way he worked through everything. Methodically. Without rushing, reading each problem twice before writing a single digit, checking each answer before moving forward. He was not the fastest in the hall. He was not the most visibly confident. He simply worked with the concentration of someone for whom this problem set was easier than the life that had preceded it. He finished with 14 minutes remaining. He went back to the beginning and checked everything once more. He found one arithmetic error in question 7 and corrected it. Then he put down his pencil and waited. When the results were announced 3 weeks later, Tunde Adeyemi had placed first in the Southwest region and third in the entire country. Chief Afolabi called the school's administrative office when the results came through. Tund was brought from the dormitory to take the call. He stood at the office phone with the administrator watching. Third in the country, Chief Afolabi said. His voice was controlled. But something beneath it was not. Yes, sir, Tund said. You told me you had never entered a competition before. I had not, sir. A long pause. Then Chief Afolabi said, You know what I am going to say. Tund said, You're going to say the world wasted time. Chief Afolabi said, The world wasted 4 years of you. I intend to make sure it does not waste one more day. He kept that promise in the years that followed. The scholarship held through all 6 years of secondary school. Chief Afolabi visited the school twice a year and took Tund to lunch each time. Not to check on his progress, which he could see from the reports, but to talk. To ask him what he was thinking. To argue with him about ideas. To treat him as a person whose mind was worth engaging rather than a project whose outcome was to be monitored. It was, Tund would say later, the first time in his life that an adult had argued with him. He thought sometimes about Mr. Oladipo, had been the first to see him, the first to say the right words in the right order. He thought Chief Afolabi would have liked him. Argue with him the way you argue with someone whose opinion matters. He found he was very good at arguing. He was not surprised. The news of the competition results spread through a bought-on-the-way news of that kind always spreads. Fast and with elaboration. Alhaji Adeyemi heard it from a man at the bus park who had seen the results in the newspaper. He sat in his empty bus at the park for a long time after the man walked away. He read the name several times. Tunde Adeyemi. Third nationally. 12 years old. He looked at the newspaper until the words stopped rearranging themselves into something easier to bear. He drove home. He sat in his parlor. Mama Beezy came in from the kitchen and looked at his face and knew something was wrong before he spoke. He showed her the newspaper. She said nothing. She went back into the kitchen. She stayed there for a long time. The neighbors who had watched a child leave through that gate with a plastic bag now discussed him with the enthusiasm of people discovering something they claimed to have always known. They had always seen something in that boy. They had always known he was different. They said this without embarrassment. One morning at the compound tap, Mama Beezy was filling her bucket when her neighbor Ayasone stopped beside her. Ayasone said, very calmly and without looking at her, "That boy of your husband's. The one who placed third in the whole country. Was it not from this compound that he left?" Mama Beezy said nothing. She kept filling her bucket. Ayasone said, "God is not sleeping," and walked away. 2 other women at the tap had heard. Nobody spoke, but everyone had understood. Mama Beezy carried her bucket back to the house and did not come out again that morning. Beezy and Biodun, who had stood in the doorway while their stepbrother walked out, were now at a school whose fees their father strained to maintain. Neither of them had competed in anything. Alhaji Adeyemi did not call Tunde directly. He did not know what he would say. He did not know how to say any of it. The apology that needed to be made, the years that could not be returned, the chair he had sat in when he told a boy that things would settle, knowing they would not, choosing not to look. But one evening, 2 weeks after he read the newspaper, he called the school. He asked the administrator if a student named Tunde Adeyemi was enrolled and how the boy was doing. The administrator said yes, he is enrolled. He is top of his class in mathematics and second overall. Alhaji Adeyemi said thank you. He did not leave his name. He hung up. He drove his bus. He came home tired. He sat in his chair. But the chair was no longer comfortable to him in the way it had been before. Something had shifted in it that would not shift back. And in his dormitory room in Ibadan, Tunde Adeyemi placed his notebook in his bag for the following day's classes. He placed the photograph of his mother in the front pocket, not the back, not the bottom, but the front, where he could reach it quickly. She was always at the front now. He turned off the small lamp on his desk. He lay on a proper mattress, not a mat, not a kitchen floor, but a proper school dormitory mattress with a fitted sheet, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. He thought about the compound yard in Sengo, the dust, the zinc sheet, the bag, the silence around him. He thought about the choice he had made in that silence. He had been 11 years old. He had been put out of his home. He had found something that could have changed his immediate circumstances entirely, and chosen not to take it. Not because he was afraid. Not because he was performing honesty for an audience. But because when he asked himself who he wanted to be in that moment, the answer was already in him, clear as a solved equation. He had been carrying the answer with him since before Mama Beezy, since before the gate, since before the mat on the kitchen floor. His mother had put it there in the years before she died, in the evenings before he slept, when she told him he was the best thing she had ever made. She had not been talking about his cleverness. She had been talking about his character. He understood that now. He closed his eyes. This story is not about money. The money was only the question. The real story is what happens when a child who's been given every reason to take the wrong path stands alone in the dust and chooses the right one. Not because someone is watching. Not because a reward is promised. But because the choosing is the thing. Because who you are when nobody is watching is who you actually are. Tunde was thrown out with a plastic bag. He found a leather bag full of money. And in the space between those 2 bags, in the silence of a compound yard on a Saturday afternoon in February, he became the person his mother had always known he was. The world will always try to convince you that what has been done to you defines you. That the gate you are pushed through determines the door you can walk into. It does not. The pen has always been in your hand. If this story moved something in you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? What happened next? Subscribe to Visa's Tales. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded today that what people decide about you is not the final word on who you are. Because the most important decisions are the ones you make when nobody is watching. And the world always finds out, eventually, what those decisions were made of.